I'm pleased to be with you tonight to just open up reflection, space of reflection and community inquiry around how it is that we might live the Dharma, the insights that arise with practice more richly, more more confidently, with more of a sense of why this matters during these challenging times. And when I say these challenging times, for all of us that may, different kind of thought bubbles arise. So what the challenges are is, a real question that each of us is going to have a different set of answers for, right? And this is one of the reasons why I think being in community is actually quite beautiful, that we inevitably can be, sort of aided in our own efforts to move through the world with more clarity and more skillfulness. We can be aided by what arises in the confrontation or the connection between our views and the views of others. We see the things that feel similar, we see the difference, right? So I'm really, really grateful to be here to just share a little bit of what the journey feels like from my perspective and invite thoughts that may be arising for you. So one of the guilty of bringing a library with me in moments like this. First of all, I was a law professor for many. I'm professor emeritus now at the University of San Francisco. So that means I'm one to want to have books. This is a light number of things for me tonight. But one of the pieces that I was kind of reading today in reflection on this time together is a piece on the simile of the mountain. And you may be familiar with this. It's from the Book of Verses, Sagata Vaga. And in this particular simile, you have King Pasenadi of Kosala, right? So I'm always interested, especially as a law professor, I was always interested in the teaching stories, and the teachings that come down through tradition that reveal how powerful people like this king in particular would come for support from the Buddha, the teacher historically known that we now know of as the Buddha, and how the Buddha would meet and sit and offer something. And again, you can see you can see the connection between reading about the Buddha, meeting someone who was empowered to go into the world. This is not a person who's living in a monastery, right? It's very interesting, it seems to me, to read and reflect on how it is that we are given a vision of the Buddha saying the Dharma is for everybody. It's not only for those, of course, who are committed, dedicated practitioners in a monastery, trying as best they can to live all the ethical principles in that beautiful context. It's for people who are out there who may have to exercise power in ways that are painful, who may be going to war, thinking about how to protect a community. And so I would think about that when teaching lawyers, as I did for many years. I taught personal injury law, et cetera. But I also helped cultivate courses on mindfulness for lawyers, and innovated in our curriculum so that our students would learn, yes, the traditional ways of practicing law, but also how to take care of themselves, how to breathe, how to notice the movements of their heart as support for doing the work. In this particular simile, the king is approaching the Blessed One, sitting to one side. You all know how it often is framed there. And describes that he says, I have been engaged in those affairs of kingship typical for head anointed kings who are intoxicated with intoxication of sovereignty, who are obsessed by greed for sensual pleasures, who have attained stable control in their country, and who rule having conquered a great sphere of territory on earth. So while this is coming to us from more than 2,000 years ago, perhaps it sounds not dissimilar to the kinds of ways that empowered beings seek to rule in this time. And he goes on to say that he was being met then, meeting with these other very empowered kings, sovereigns, and they were sharing some of what they have seen. For example, I'm coming from the east, and there I saw a great mountain, high as clouds, coming this way, crushing all living beings. And I'm not going to read you all of this, but just to say that each of the different sovereigns comes with some version of, I witnessed a mountain crushing living beings. Clouds coming this way, crushing living beings. So great peril was arising, in other words. Again, perhaps this somehow feels a little bit familiar to the time. Metaphorically, what are the mountains that are crushing down on human beings? Some of it is metaphorical, but perhaps some of us saw some of the video from Switzerland a couple of weeks ago. There's video from a mountain in the Alps of Switzerland, and it's not the first time that this has happened, but for reasons associated with many things, melting of glaciers, etc. Peaks of cliffs in the Alps are shifting and falling. Land is sliding down onto valley floors, and there's video of that kind of covering cities, just as is described here. So this video came across my feed, just in the last couple of weeks. But even if we didn't know that that was actually happening, it's painful. The good news, here's the good news, I should say. I have to say this when I tell the story. I have to say the good news. Switzerland is aware that the Alps are coming down, so they have these systems in place for noticing and alarming, or putting out notice. And so what's happened in this particular instance, and has been happening in the other previous instances where they've had the system in place, and this has been happening, notification was given to folks in the valley floor, and they were given an opportunity to get out. And in this last landslide that I saw reported, everybody got out except for one person. So it was a city of about 300 people, little village of about 300 people, little homes down in the valley. Everybody heeded the warning. One person didn't. So that's kind of good news. Science, technology, these things are happening, but people are surviving them. But we live in a time, right, where peril is real. And the peril can look literally like mountains coming down, or that can be a metaphor for all the ways that many of us feel vulnerable right now. Maybe I'm the only one, but there's probably in this room is another, at least one other, who is feeling something like the threat of a mountain. If the mountain isn't coming down, the threat, right? It could be, well, what are our mountains? Economic changes, immigration rules, and the impacts on communities. Rule of law, talk about that. Right? I mean, it's, for one, sitting from having been a law professor for 25 years. The changes and threats to the rule of law. Talk about a mountain, feeling like a mountain coming down. So as this king was sharing to the blessed, the kings out there are seeing the mountains coming down. And the question that is put to the Buddha is, when aging and death are rolling in, what should be done? When the mountains are coming down, what should be done? And this is what the Blessing One said. Just as mountains of solid rock, massive, reaching to the sky, might draw together from all sides, crushing all in the four quarters. Again, it was more of a threat then than it is now. At least now people can get out of the way of the mountain because of the warning system. Back then, it would just happen. So aging and death come, rolling over living beings. So yes, we get warning systems about certain things now. There are other changes that are happening overnight, and we're not getting the warning systems. We don't have them in place yet. Katyas, which is a name for kings there, Brahmins, Vasas, Sudras, these are all empowered people at that time, as well as scavengers, the Buddha says. None of these are spared. It doesn't matter, high, low, the mountains are coming down, everybody's vulnerable. Everybody's vulnerable. They spare none along the way, but come crushing everything. How many of us feel that this is sort of that kind of time? Yeah? Nothing, we've seen the wealthiest human being on earth being threatened with deportation. I'm just going to name that happened recently. And when people are threatened with deportation, that may not just mean back to South Africa where this person perhaps had a home one time. We have seen people be deported to practically, right? So these are the things that are happening that cause all of us to feel like the crushing could come. There's no ground there for troops, et cetera, he says. One can't defeat them by infantry or subterfuge, right? Or buy them off by means of wealth. So we've been here before, haven't we, humankind? Therefore, the Buddha says, a person of wisdom here, out of regard for his own good, steadfast, should rest faith in the Buddha, the spirit of the teacher, the Dharma, the spirit of the teaching, and the Sangha. When one conducts oneself by Dharma, with body, speech, and mind, they praise one here in the present life, and after death, one rejoices. Yeah. So the basic teaching then is keep doing what we've been doing, what we just did here tonight, practicing together, experiencing the community of practice, being inspired by the teaching, the teachers on whose shoulders we rest. This is it. This is it. I personally believe this is enough. I wouldn't be here if I didn't really believe. There are moments when I feel quite down, right? You can imagine. I will say one of the things that I did as a law professor, one of the things I was called to do and willingly did was teach classes, helping students deal with issues of social identity, race, racism. It's what led me to write this book, The Inner Work of Racial Justice. Healing ourselves and transforming our communities is the subtitle, but it's integrating all of these practices in service of helping us better stay in relationship to that aspect of our experience that is inviting understanding about how race and our histories, but not only race, because I think of when we turn toward social identity, we're always inviting a kind of a dance of all the identities because they intersect with gender and race and age and race and religion and immigration status. It's all there to bring awareness and maybe even to cultivate some insight into aspects of all of that that are impermanent or ways that we think of ourselves as hard-bounded and separate and encased in these identities, but actually it may not be so. That may be part of what feels real, but may not be the whole truth. So I had been experimenting with that and bringing that in, and that's how I ended up doing that. But all of this is to say, part of my work, of course, has been, for some people, has fallen or does fall or can fall under the rubric of the dreaded DEI. But even if it didn't, even if I had done none of that, just being in this body at this time, when the kinds of threats and so on and so forth is happening around us, it's a time of rising fear for any one of us, in a time of the cultivation of a regime of fear for all of us. Y'all hear me? Right? So each of us feel this differently, of course, depending on what we're doing, who we are, where we are. It's the both and. We have our unique experience of it, and all of us are in the ocean of a rising regime of fear, an effort to make all of us feel afraid, up to and including the richest man in the world, who, did y'all hear about this? He was threatened by Steve Bannon. Musk was threatened by Steve Bannon. That perhaps, Bannon said, perhaps Musk should be investigated. His immigration status should be investigated, and maybe he should be deported. So any one of us can feel like, wow, deported to where? El Salvador? The money does not protect us. The money does not protect us. The law, it turns out, can't fully protect us. We're doing the best we can. You see the judges sometimes sort of standing up. So, can the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, can these practices be of support? How can they be of support? What's it like for you? So as I say these remaining few words, and then I want to just pause and see if reflections are arising either on the meditation practice or on any aspect of what I've shared here. I will say that one of the things that I do is offer space online, my own kind of community of practice. I call it Mount Iris. So the mountain reading was very like, okay. But we gather just online. And the folks who have encountered my readings and writings and teachings over the years now, this came out in 2019, right? So right before the pandemic, right before the reckoning with George Floyd, people were saying to me then, oh my gosh, it's like you just magically wrote a book to help support meditating as we look at this history, as we do this. And now, it's a different place. We're in a different place. But a lot of the folks who are drawn to that show up in my Mount Iris community of people of different backgrounds, actually disproportionately white racialized people, but who found something in this conversation that now they're like, where can I? But in that space, we meet on Sundays as well. There's just a lot of fear. People are talking about the checkpoints in LA, the militarized spaces in Los Angeles. One person in Sangha spoke about having left Los Angeles because of the fires. So we're all feeling, nobody's healed from climate distress. The last, we've all gone through battered climate distress, especially here in California. And now we're having it. So, and I've had a member ask, so the questions of how do we live in the midst of all of this are coming from that place. So if they're in this room, we are not alone. We're all feeling this. We're all vulnerable. We're all heartbroken, distressed beyond words, many people. I don't know if anybody in this room has felt that. And if we already have been struggling with something, which again, I've talked about climate, immigration, race stuff, but they're just the basic struggles of age, health, income, inequality, all the things. It's all compounding. And yet I smile because there actually always is this opportunity to come back home to the reality that, in fact, no matter how relatively well things are going or how catastrophically crazy they seem, the truth is we nevertheless have to figure out some way to deal with the vulnerability of being a human body that has a birth and a death date that we usually don't choose. So whether we're in a relatively peaceful, what feels like a sane period or chaotic period, how we deal with the challenges of being alive, it's the same curriculum. It's the same curriculum. It's noticing where we're getting stuck. It's noticing when the thoughts are going on, autopilot, and where we are in need of a pause. It's noticing our particular unique ways of getting stuck, because we all have them. It's, it may be holding on to the way things were and being in resistance to all the things that are actually not just changing, but have already changed. They're already not the same. It may be opposite of that, pushing things away that are trying to be known better, just refusing to get to know them better. And we all do this in our unique ways, and our culture does this. Grasping, pushing away. It could be, again, the 3 root hindrances, right? Greed, hatred, delusion. Could just be being a little confused or a lot confused. I do believe that these ways that we have been given to see more clearly how we get stuck. And from that place of like, there I am again, wanting things to be really different right now, and getting kind of a little bit overly caught up in the sense of grievance and sadness and maybe the fear, to even just for a moment be able to sort of notice that, right? To notice that I am doing that, or this mind is doing that, or I'm holding that in that way, can be a sort of a momentary sort of opening up of capacity to have a sense of spaciousness between the thoughts and the ride that they can take us on. And if we can, from that place of spaciousness, it's not that we're disconnecting and bypassing and just putting our head in the sand, but it is recognizing that this one body can't handle it all the time. We cannot put ourselves under the fire hose of information and doing this, right, without really suffering. And is that what we want? To just be flat out exhausted and unable to help anybody because we've just been overwhelmed with all of the things. And so for me, I'll just say for me, these practices have helped me with titrating that, figuring out that balance. I want to stay involved. I want to know what's going on. I cannot know everything. I cannot do everything. I cannot fix everything. Sometimes I just need a break. Sometimes I just need to put it all down, lie down and let the earth hold me for a while, do a deep body scan, surrender. Yeah. In the spirit and faith that I will restore, because I too am life, and each moment does have some new possibilities in it that I may not have been able to see when I was dug in, but now if I rest, maybe I can see them a little more clearly. So there are ways that I do feel deeply supported by these practices, and it's challenging. The last thing I'll say is Greed, hatred, delusion, yes. Howard Thurman, I mentioned, I'm not assuming anybody was here the last time I was presenting online. But I did in that talk about Howard Thurman, a teacher of many people in the last century whose names we may know better than we know his. He taught Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson. He started a church here in San Francisco called the Church for the Fellowship of All People, which meant that name, right? It was, let's all come together, let's desegregate churches, right? And he started that church in the middle of World War II, when there was in this city interning of Japanese and this and that, and segregation of Black and white. He started the Church for the Fellowship of All People at that time. That was the kind of person Howard Thurman was. He would often say, in the way that to me anyway looks like he was reading and thinking about Buddhism, but didn't always say it, that in times of oppression and spaces of oppression, there will be greed and hatred for sure, but there will be deception, lies, right? There will be, in other words, it will be hard for us to say clear because there will be a cultivated effort to keep us deluded, right? So we have to be sensitive and aware that it's not simply about how good we are at sitting and meditating, but there does come a call to engage in awareness of what's happening systemically to us. So bringing that, what the Buddha actually called external mindfulness, right? It's inner mindfulness and external mindfulness that we are cultivating. But when you see it and you know that there is a regime of fear being cultivated. And to create fear, you have to say a lot of things that maybe aren't true about people, right? For example, when you know that that's going on, there's such a difference, right, in your ability to say, there that is, we knew that was kind of coming. We do the best we can to keep ourselves thriving and in relationship with people who see things and are not trying to delude ourselves and each other. We bring together this energy of discernment. We can sort of know that certain places and spaces are places where we're at least trying to let the truth be spoken. That is part of what we're saying we're doing. And so underlying, of course, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Three Jewels, the Eightfold Path, all of that, ethical commitments to non-harming, which again, I'm not saying our sanghas are perfect or we ever, but at least to be in spaces where you say, actually, part of what we are trying to do is live a little differently. Even in the face of all that, we're trying not to harm. That by itself, if that's our only ethical promise, right? If we're not sure we're ready to put intoxicants aside altogether. Every single last intoxicant, we might have a glass of wine here, but whatever it is. Just to say, I'm going to minimize harm. I might just start there. And this time, that's a big one. But yes, we have these precepts and practices, these commitments to non-harming, to not abusing our relationships. So, not engaging in sexual misconduct, to not lying. Right. So to be in communities where we're at least saying these are the things that we want to try and stand for. We may not be perfect. That's why we need each other, right? But here we are. To me, anyway, this is cause for great celebration. This is cause for discerning. I want to be there. This is cause for showing up, whether online or in person, for each other and for ourselves. And just seeing how little by little, day by day, moment by moment, we get through. And again, we know we're humans, we're soft-bellied, carbon-based beings. We're not going to be here forever. We never worked. That was never promised to us. So it's not really, yes, some things will happen probably, there will be pain. There is much more pain and suffering now than I ever wanted to see in this lifetime. I'm not saying that is true. And the question I want to wake up to all the time is, how do I want to live this one precious life that I have? Do I want to not just kind of not delude myself, not get stuck, but also bring love? The answer for me is yes. And so every moment that I can do that in the midst of the fire, and to create a little bit of a clearing, a little bit of an oasis where other people can feel safe to feel again and to care, I'm here for that. So pausing and inviting us, thank you all for the gift of your presence, your practice, your being here for each other in Sangha. And may the benefits, the merits of our time together in some way, seen and not seen, obvious, not obvious, serve to lighten the burden of someone here who really needs support. Some way that all of us here will touch the lives of others from this place. And maybe even just energetically might be a bright light in what seems sometimes like a darkening world. May it be so.